Princess Charlotte does not have $5 billion. What she has is a number that escaped its original context, got repeated a few thousand times, and turned into one of the most persistent money myths of the last decade. That number came from a marketing report, not a bank statement, and understanding how it got attached to a newborn girl tells you almost everything about how royal wealth actually works. Let's go back to where it started. On a spring morning in 2015, a baby girl was born at St. Mary's Hospital in London, and within hours, the British press had already started doing the math on her. The youngest member of the royal family, 4-month-old Princess Charlotte, would be worth nearly $5 billion to the British economy, according to Brand Finance. That's not a typo, and it's not a joke. A consultancy put a number on a 4-month-old, and the number was enormous. Here's the part that matters. That $5 billion figure wasn't about anything sitting in a trust fund. It wasn't cash, land, jewels, or shares. Brand Finance's estimate measured the economic benefit generated for British business, retail, tourism, brand endorsements, not personal wealth sitting in a bank account. The company that produced it, Brand Finance, does this kind of valuation work for corporations and celebrities all the time. It just happened to point its spreadsheet at a baby. The comparison numbers tell you exactly what kind of exercise this was. Her older brother, Prince George, was valued at a mere $3.6 billion by the same measure. Their mother did even better. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was estimated to be worth $7.2 billion to the economy by the same methodology. Nobody watching the news that week thought Kate Middleton had $7.2 billion in a Swiss account. They understood correctly that this was about influence, not inheritance. That understanding didn't survive the trip to TikTok a decade later. What actually justified the number, even as a projection? Fashion. Plain and simple. Charlotte had appeared in public only twice by that point. The day she was born and her christening, yet the value she was already generating for British business was described as impressive. The so-called Charlotte effect was already visible before she could sit up on her own. Her birth alone was estimated to have generated more than $150 million in economic benefit. There's a specific object that made this real for people, and it's almost funny in retrospect. The lacy shawl Charlotte wore when her parents introduced her to the world sold out fast, with the makers reporting a big increase in orders from around the world thanks to the media coverage. A $100 baby blanket, worn for maybe 20 minutes on a hospital driveway, moved enough units that a small English company had to talk about it publicly. Then it happened again at her christening. The vintage pram that carried her to the ceremony caused a similar craze, with one restoration company saying it was inundated with messages, emails, and calls after the event. That's the entire mechanism behind the $5 billion. A baby wears something. Parents buy the same thing for their own kids. Sales spike, and a consultancy extrapolates that spike across a lifetime of future appearances. Brand Finance's CEO at the time, David Hay, put it simply, the unofficial endorsement of Charlotte, George, and Kate had a financial effect running into millions annually. Millions annually projected out over decades, dressed up as a lump sum. That's how you get to billions. Now, fast forward more than a decade, past a global pandemic, past a change of monarch, past Charlotte growing from a christening gown into a schoolgirl in a Wales jersey at rugby matches, and the number hasn't updated. It hasn't adjusted for inflation, hasn't been revised by a new report, hasn't been checked against anything. It just got picked up wholesale and dropped into short-form video captions with a new job, proving she's the richest kid on the planet. One widely viewed TikTok claimed Charlotte had a net worth of almost $8 billion, calling her the richest person in the most powerful royal family in history and saying she was worth more than the Kardashians combined. Another simply challenged viewers to name a kid richer than her. Then let the silence answer the question. That clip alone was liked 358,000 times and viewed roughly 2 million times. So where did the specific figure still circulating, the $5 billion net worth, not economic impact, actually come from? The figures quoted across TikTok appear to trace back to a Reader's Digest article that tried to estimate real net worth figures for other royals, but took a different approach for the young whale's children. With almost no public financial information to work from, that piece simply assigned numbers. It stated that Prince George was estimated at a net worth of $3 billion and Prince Louis between $70 million and $125 million, before declaring that Charlotte, however, took the cake from the entire family with a whopping $5 billion. That single sentence, "takes the cake from the entire family," is doing an enormous amount of work. It's presenting a brand value projection from a decade earlier as if it were a personal balance sheet about children who have never held a job, never signed a contract, and never received a lump sum inheritance in their lives. So here's where the story actually needs to go next. If the $5 billion isn't personal wealth, and it isn't even an updated figure, what is Charlotte's actual financial reality? Where does a royal child's money, the real money, the money that pays for her school fees and her security detail, genuinely come from? To answer that, you have to stop looking at marketing reports and start looking at how the House of Windsor is actually funded, right down to the specific medieval estate that pays for Charlotte's entire household. Let's deal with the origin story properly, because the mechanics behind that $5 billion figure explain something bigger than one princess. They explain how an entire industry of royal net worth content gets built on air. Brand Finance isn't a tabloid, it's a legitimate business valuation firm that normally prices logos, sports franchises, and celebrity endorsement deals. Around Charlotte's birth, the firm didn't just look at her. It ran the same exercise on the whole family, and the results are worth sitting with. The British royal family as a brand, described by Queen Elizabeth II and as the firm, was valued at $87 billion in total, adding an estimated $1.8 billion to the British economy every year. That's the real scale of the exercise. Charlotte's $5 billion wasn't a standalone fortune. It was one line item inside an $87 billion brand valuation of an entire institution, tourism, jewels, ceremony, and all. Brand Finance kept running versions of this exercise as Charlotte got older, and the numbers moved around depending on which year's report you grabbed. A separate projection put her lifetime economic contribution at £3.2 billion, or roughly $4.5 billion, compared to an estimated £2.4 billion, or about $3.2 billion for her brother George. A few years after that, a study reported Charlotte's figure at £3.5 billion against George's £3.4 billion, calculated from a mix of estimated future inheritance and individual economic impact. Different year, different methodology, different currency conversion, similar headline. None of these reports agree with each other on an exact number, which is itself a clue that nobody is measuring anything fixed. They're all estimating the same fuzzy thing, influence, and rounding it to a big, clean, shareable digit. Why does Charlotte keep beating her older brother in these rankings, when he's the one actually in line for the throne? The answer isn't royal protocol, it's retail math. Brand Finance's marketing director explained that Charlotte's endorsement effect would likely be felt across a broader range of products than George's, simply because the children's and women's fashion markets are larger than the boys' market, giving her a wider scope for monetizing her brand and therefore a higher valuation. In plain English, little girls' clothes sell more units than little boys' clothes. So a girl who influences that market scores higher on a spreadsheet built to measure exactly that. It has nothing to do with succession, inheritance, or any pound sterling Charlotte will ever personally touch. And the fashion effect itself is documented well beyond one lacy shawl. In one instance, after photos surfaced of Charlotte in pink fleece booties on a skiing holiday, the children's wear company that made them sold 259 pairs, a 97% jump over normal sales. That's real. Retailers really do plan around royal outings. Brand Finance has separately named Kate Middleton the most powerful royal fashion influencer, reporting that pieces she wears increase desirability by 38% among American shoppers. The pattern is consistent. And it's genuinely useful information for a marketing firm's clients. What it isn't is a description of what's sitting in anyone's name at a bank. Here's the theme of the whole story. There's a wide gulf between being valuable and having value. Charlotte is valuable to retailers, to tourism boards, to the tabloid economy that covers her family. But being valuable to other people's balance sheets isn't the same as owning assets on your own. A star athlete who sells out stadiums generates enormous value for a team owner without that value ever becoming the athlete's personal property. Charlotte, still a young girl, is functionally in the same position, except she's not even an employee yet. She's a symbol other companies are pricing. Even the outlets that ran with the $5 billion headline eventually had to acknowledge this distinction once people started asking follow-up questions. Newsweek noted that the TikTok figures for Charlotte's net worth actually stem from an estimate of her value to the UK economy, not her own riches, and that she may, in reality, never be allowed to profit from any of it. Royal children don't get paid endorsement fees when a shawl sells out. They don't get a cut when a stroller company gets flooded with calls. The money flows to G.H. Hurt & Sons, to Prams with Pizzazz, to MyOneFirstYears.com. Private businesses that happen to have been standing near a camera at the right moment. Charlotte generates the spike. Somebody else cashes the check. So if the number isn't personal, real royal money has to come from somewhere else entirely. A system with actual deeds, actual bank transfers, and actual legal structure behind it. That system exists. It's centuries old. And it's the thing that will genuinely determine how comfortable Charlotte's adult life turns out to be. It starts not with Charlotte, but with her father and with a 700-year-old piece of real estate that changed hands the moment her great-grandmother died. Here's the actual machinery, and it's a lot less glamorous than a viral number, but it's the part with real money attached to it. When Queen Elizabeth II died in September 2022, the line of title holders shifted overnight, and one specific asset moved with it. Prince William inherited the Duchy of Cornwall Estate, a private landholding valued at more than £1 billion, roughly $1.2 billion. This isn't a metaphorical inheritance. It's 52,000 plus hectares of actual farms, homes, and commercial property across the UK. Established back in 1337 by Edward III, specifically to give financial independence to his son and heir, with a charter dictating that each future Duke of Cornwall would be the eldest surviving son of the monarch. William is now that Duke. Charlotte, as a daughter and not the eldest son, is not and never will be. The entire estate skips past her by design. The same medieval rule that once excluded royal daughters from crowns still quietly excludes them from this specific fortune. What the duchy produces is real, ongoing income, and it's public because the estate publishes accounts every year. In his first full financial year running the duchy, William received £23,102,000 money. The estate itself describes as private income used to fund the prince's offices and charitable interests, and eventually those of his children. Read that phrase again. Eventually those of his children. That's the actual pipe that Charlotte's day-to-day comfort flows through, not a $5 billion valuation from a decade-old marketing report. An annual multi-million-pound income her father draws from a working estate out of which her school fees, her security, and her household costs get paid. This is worth contrasting directly with the number everyone remembers. A brand finance-style projection assigns Charlotte a $5 billion figure built from future economic impact and hypothetical inheritance. Meanwhile, the actual documented cash moving through her family's private accounts in a single year sits at roughly £23 million, an amount the duchy itself confirms is used to cover both the public and private life of William's household, not handed out as separate personal fortunes to each child. One number is a media estimate of influence stretched across a lifetime. The other is an audited annual figure that has to stretch across housekeeping, staff, travel, and 3 children's upbringing in a single year. They are not the same species of number, and conflating them is exactly how the $5 billion myth survives. There's a second, separate funding stream that matters just as much, and it's public money rather than private estate income. The sovereign grant forms the core of publicly funded royal duties, calculated as a percentage of the profits from the crown estate, and it covers security, household staff, and official travel for working royals. Charlotte's security detail, in other words, isn't drawn from a personal trillion-dollar reserve. It's a line item inside a public grant that Parliament reviews periodically, the same grant that funds palace roof repairs and staff pensions. Then there's the part almost nobody making viral videos mentions at all: what happens after a monarch dies. Charlotte's grandfather, King Charles, is expected to receive a substantial inheritance from his own mother, who left behind a private fortune estimated at more than $500 million, though it remains unclear exactly how those assets will be divided among her 4 children. Crucially, that inheritance passes tax-free thanks to a decades-old agreement exempting parts of the monarch's estate from the UK's 40% inheritance tax. When it's left to the heir to the throne, that exemption is enormous. It's the difference between a family fortune surviving intact across generations and one that gets cut nearly in half every time a monarch dies, the way most British estates would be taxed. But notice who the rule protects: the heir to the throne. That's William. Eventually, it will be George. Charlotte, third in line and drifting further from the crown every time her brother has children of his own. Isn't the person that rule was written to protect? This is the actual reason the $5 billion figure feels so hollow once you look under it. Royal wealth isn't a personal pile any family member can dip into. Billion-dollar family trusts exist as a private safety net for Charlotte and her siblings, managed by professional trustees and shielded from public audits, with the exact value kept confidential. There's genuine long-term security there. Almost certainly. What there isn't, based on anything publicly documented, is a $5 billion personal account with Charlotte's name on it, waiting for her 18th birthday. So real royal money is inherited estate income, tightly tied to title, gender-restricted by centuries-old succession rules, and administered by trustees rather than handed out in lump sums. The $5 billion is something else entirely, a brand valuation, which raises the next, more interesting question. If Charlotte doesn't inherit the duchy, and she's not first in line for anything, what does the future actually look like for the richest child in the world, who technically doesn't have any billions? What is she actually set up to receive, and how does that compare to what her older brother is guaranteed the moment he becomes king? This is where the stakes of the whole story sharpen, because we're no longer asking whether the number is real. We're asking what Charlotte's actual future looks like next to her brothers, and the contrast is stark. George is the one built for permanent royal wealth. As the eldest son and direct heir, he's in line to eventually inherit the crown itself, the Duchy of Cornwall, the Duchy of Lancaster, and everything that comes bundled with being sovereign, the same estate structure that currently generates over £20 million a year for whoever holds the title. Brand finance-style estimates have pegged George's own valuation anywhere between $3 billion and $4.6 billion, depending on the year and methodology, tied specifically to his future inheritance of British royal assets and the Duchy of Cornwall estate. Whatever number you use, George's version of this story has an actual mechanism behind it, a title, an estate, a line of succession that guarantees him something concrete. Charlotte's doesn't have that mechanism. Her number was always styled from fashion sales projections, not succession law. Louis makes the contrast even sharper, because he's the control group nobody talks about. Louis, the youngest, has been estimated at a net worth between $70 million and $125 million, a fraction of his siblings' headline figures, by the same outlet's own accounting. If these numbers reflected real family wealth being divided among children, you'd expect something closer to parity, or at least a split based on birth order and title. Instead, you get George in the billions, Charlotte allegedly ahead of him, and Louis sitting 2 orders of magnitude lower. That's not how inheritance works. That's how ad impression math works, where the size of the market you can influence, toddler boy versus toddler girl versus baby, produces wildly different scores. So what does Charlotte's actual documented path look like, separate from any of that? She's a working member of a family, not yet a working royal in her own right. She attends school and takes part in family engagements, but does not hold a separate personal job or income the way her father does through the duchy. She's currently 11 years old, having been born in May 2015. Everything about her material life right now, the private school, the security team following her to and from, the wardrobe that keeps accidentally selling out at retailers, runs through her parents' household budget, which is itself funded by that duchy income and the public sovereign grant, not by any personal account attached to her name. What could genuinely change for her later in life? There's precedent within her own family for what royal children eventually receive once they're adults, and it's worth being honest that it's substantial without being anywhere near $5 billion. Prince Harry's own reported inheritance and settlements over the years have run into the tens of millions, not billions, money tied to trusts, established by his mother and grandmother, released at specific life stages, like weddings or milestone birthdays. Charlotte's version of that will likely look similar in structure: an eventual release from a family trust, administered by professional trustees, sized to reflect generational security rather than headline-grabbing wealth. Those trusts are explicitly described as providing long-term financial security rather than functioning as an accessible personal fortune, with the exact figures kept confidential even from most royal watchers. There's also the property angle, which is real but limited. Her official residence is Kensington Palace, where she lives alongside her parents, and she has access to royal properties and estates for official engagements. But access isn't ownership. She doesn't hold the deed to Kensington Palace any more than an employee owns the office building they work in. When William eventually becomes king, the palace, the duchy, the crown, assets all pass to him and eventually to George. Charlotte's role shifts too at that point, from third-in-line princess to a more peripheral royal figure, likely taking on charitable patronages and public duties, similar to what her great-aunts and cousins have done, funded by whatever family allocation gets settled on her, not by any economic impact projection. Here's where the stakes of this whole story peak: the gap between what the internet insists Charlotte owns and what she's actually structurally positioned to receive isn't a rounding error. It's the difference between owning a $1.2 billion working estate outright, which is George's eventual position, and receiving an undisclosed trust distribution at some point in adulthood, which is Charlotte's actual position. One is enshrined in a 700-year-old charter. The other depends entirely on decisions made by trustees, by her father, and eventually by whichever king is sitting on the throne when she's an adult asking for her share. And that leads directly to the only question left to answer. If the $5 billion never existed as personal wealth, if the real numbers are duchy income in the tens of millions and trust funds nobody will ever publish, why has the myth survived more than a decade through a change of monarch, through Charlotte growing from a christening gown into a school uniform without a single correction managing to catch up to it? The myth survives because it was never designed to be checked. It was designed to be shared. Look at how the number actually spreads today. In 2026, more than a decade after the original Brand Finance report ran, recent rankings of the richest kid in the world still list Charlotte at the top with an estimated $5 billion, describing British royal children as holding the top 2 spots by a wide margin over American celebrity kids. The list even runs the comparison out to Ryan Kaji, the YouTube personality whose earnings actually are personal, actually are earned, and actually sit in accounts he can access. A roughly $100 million fortune built from content rather than inherited from a family estate, landing on the same list as a $5 billion royal figure built from an entirely different kind of math. Put those two side by side and the mismatch becomes obvious. One number is money a child's family actually controls. The other is a marketing consultancy's decade-old guess about retail sales, still being quoted as if it were a bank balance. Even outlets that set out specifically to check the figure end up landing in the same soft place. One Royal Finance Breakdown acknowledged that Forbes does not publish an official net worth figure for Charlotte at all, since her finances are part of private family arrangements that aren't disclosed in detail, meaning every $5 billion headline you've ever seen was never sourced to anything resembling a rigorous financial audit in the first place. No Forbes list, no audited statement, no trustee confirmation. Just a decade-old brand valuation filtered through a listicle, filtered through TikTok captions, filtered through 100 imitation articles, all citing each other instead of the original source. And there is a real phenomenon underneath the number one worth giving its due. Retail analysts do genuinely track something called the Princess Charlotte effect, describing documented sales spikes whenever she's photographed in a particular outfit. It's a real term used in UK fashion industry analysis, not an invented nickname. That part of the story is completely true, and it's genuinely remarkable that a child too young to choose her own clothes has that much pull over a national retail sector. It's just that moving product for other companies and personally holding $5 billion are two entirely different facts, and only one of them belongs to Charlotte. So here's where all 5 parts land. The core transformation this story tracks isn't Charlotte getting richer over more than a decade. It's a number-changing meaning without anyone updating the label. In 2015, a legitimate consultancy priced a family's brand power the way it would price a corporation's, got an eye-catching figure, and moved on to its next client. That figure got orphaned from its methodology, picked up by a listicle that reworded economic impact into net worth without asking the difference, and then got launched across social media by people who understood correctly that Royal Baby is richer than the Kardashians, gets more views than marketing firm estimates, fashion industry sales bump. Meanwhile, the actual financial reality kept running on its own. Boring, well-documented track. Her father draws a 7-figure private income each year from a 700-year-old landed estate. Income, the duchy itself says, is meant to eventually support his children as well as his household. Public funds cover the costs tied to her role as a future working royal, security, staff, official travel, through a grant that Parliament reviews on a regular schedule. Somewhere behind all of that sits a family trust, professionally managed, unaudited by the public, that will presumably release something to her later in life. An amount nobody outside a small circle of trustees actually knows. None of that is $5 billion. All of it is real. That's the actual ending to this story. And it's a more interesting one than the headline promised. Charlotte isn't sitting on a fortune. She's sitting inside a 600-year-old financial machine that was built to protect a family's position across centuries, engineered around titles and estates that, by design, favor her older brother and will one day favor her nephews over her. Her own share of it, whatever eventually reaches her, will be decided quietly by people whose names you'll never read in a viral caption, sized to keep a Windsor comfortable rather than to make headlines. The $5 billion was never wrong because someone lied. It was wrong because two very different questions: how much value does this child generate for other people's businesses? And how much money does this child personally own? Got mashed into a single number and never got pulled apart again. Now you know where the seam is. And the next time that caption pops up on your feed, promising you the richest kid on earth, you'll know exactly which decade-old spreadsheet it's quoting and exactly why it still doesn't add up.